My name is Rachel Whitmore. I'm 41 years old, and I spent 5 years trying to be part of a family that never wanted me there. I cooked, I listened, I tried. But when my stepson needed emergency surgery and my husband asked me to foot the bill, I said no. And that answer changed everything. Because what they didn't realize was I had already given enough, more than enough. And I wasn't about to buy my way into a place that was never mine to begin with. Before I tell you how that one word, no, unraveled a marriage and exposed years of quiet betrayal, hit the like button if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home. Subscribe if you've had to draw a hard line just to protect your peace. And if you've ever been guilt-tripped for saying no, this story is for you. Grab something warm. We're going deep. I met Mark Evans at a financial conference in Seattle. He was kind, grounded, a high school teacher with a tired smile and the soft-spoken tone of someone used to being overlooked. We dated for a year before we married. At the time, his son Ethan was still living with his ex-wife Julia. The agreement was that Ethan would stay with her until he graduated high school. I was fine with that. I never wanted to replace anyone's mother. I just wanted to build something stable, quiet, real. When Ethan moved in with us at 16, the air changed instantly. He didn't slam doors or throw tantrums. No, his rejection was colder, more calculated. The kind that doesn't yell but twists the knife slowly. He critiqued everything about me, my laugh, my outfits, the too small apartment, the fact that I worked from home. He'd say things like, "Dad, why do we live like this in front of me?" He once referred to my favorite reading chair as the spinster throne. And Mark, he'd shrug, he's adjusting. I started to adjust too. I adjusted to being left out of family conversations. I adjusted to being ignored when Ethan came home with school news he'd tell Mark privately. Never me. I adjusted to walking on eggshells in my own kitchen. But I held on, told myself it was just teenage angst, that maybe, if I just stayed kind and consistent, things would soften. That illusion shattered the day I offered to contribute to Ethan's college fund. Mark had just been through a rough patch. Budget cuts at his school meant his paycheck had taken a hit. I had a good quarter at my firm and wanted to help, quietly. I put together a small college investment plan, nothing flashy, just a gesture. I told Mark over dinner, "I've been saving a little for Ethan's tuition," I said. Hopeful. I'd love to help him get a strong start. He didn't smile. Instead, he stared at me for a moment too long and said, "You can't buy your way into being his mom." I still remember the weight of that silence. The way my fork felt suddenly too loud against the plate. The way my heart dropped like I'd been called out for something shameful. I never mentioned the college account again. That night, I made a quiet decision. I would no longer push myself into spaces I wasn't invited into. I would respect the boundaries they had so clearly drawn. I stepped back not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. Ethan graduated high school and moved out. No big goodbye, just a duffel bag and a text to Mark. "I'll send my new address later." We heard bits and pieces from Julia over the next year. He'd dropped out of college after 2 semesters, changed majors 3 times, was working part-time at a car detailing shop, struggling to pay rent, hadn't spoken to his father in weeks at some point. Still, I never said, "I told you so," not once, because parenting is messy. And I knew what it meant to feel untethered. But I also knew what it meant to be rejected, repeatedly, and still be expected to give. And then 2 years after he moved out, we got the call. Ethan had been managing a chronic condition for years, something genetic. Julia had said, but now it had worsened. The medication was no longer working. He needed surgery, fast, but he had no insurance. And Julia, she wasn't stepping in. At least, not yet. So Mark asked me. It was late past 10 p.m. when he brought it up. "I talked to Ethan," he said, not looking at me. He asked for help. I paused. "Okay. He needs money. He's scared." And then, after a long pause, he asked, "Would you be willing to help? It might be a way to reset things." That word reset hit me sideways. like this was a video game and not my life. I looked at him carefully. Let me get this straight. After years of silence, disrespect, and rejection, he needs money. And you think I'm the solution? Mark bristled. That's not what I said. But it's what you meant. And then I said it, I won't buy my way into being his mom. Can I? His face turned to stone. That's cruel. Is it, or is it finally honest? His voice rose. This is your chance to do the right thing. I matched his tone. I already did for 5 years. Quietly, kindly, consistently. And neither of you gave a damn. The next words out of his mouth weren't angry, they were ice cold. Maybe we need to reconsider this marriage. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about Ethan. This was about value. And to them. Mine was only real when it was financial. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay still beside Mark, listening to the familiar rhythm of his breath, the subtle creak of our ceiling fan, the occasional car passing on the wet Portland street. My mind didn't race, it paced. Controlled, slow, heavy. Like a woman walking the perimeter of her own prison, counting the cracks in the walls she built with her own hands. In 5 years of this marriage, I had bent myself backwards to be what they needed: agreeable, steady, invisible when necessary, useful when called upon. I had bitten my tongue when Ethan mimicked Julia's dismissive tone. I had folded towels and packed lunchboxes and paid for utilities that no one ever noticed, all in the name of quiet peace. I had accepted being the family's shadow until they needed a spotlight. The words, maybe we need to reconsider this marriage, didn't sting the way you might think. They didn't explode inside me. They landed like a soft click, like the sound of a lock turning on a door I had known, deep down, would eventually close. By morning, the fog outside had thinned, but the silence between Mark and me was thicker than ever. He didn't speak as he dressed. I didn't look up from my coffee as he left. He mumbled something about work. I didn't ask if he'd be back for dinner. I knew the answer would only be an echo after he left. I sat at my desk, staring at my screen, but my fingers didn't move. Instead, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in 3 years. Inside was the paperwork for a 529 college savings account titled quietly under Ethan's name, $12,000. Every dollar placed there during the first year of our marriage. When I still believed gestures would be noticed, that quiet effort would be enough to change how they saw me. I never told Mark about it. Never told Ethan either. It wasn't meant to be leverage. It was a gift they never let me give. Seeing it now, untouched, gathering digital dust, felt surreal, like staring at a love letter you wrote but never mailed. And just like that, something inside me shifted. I printed the most recent account summary, wrote a short note in case you thought I never cared, and left it on Mark's desk, tucked neatly beneath his stack of exam papers. No confrontation, no argument, just truth. Quiet, cold, unshakable. Then I picked up my phone and called Tony McBride, a lawyer I'd worked with on estate plans for clients. When he picked up, I skipped the pleasantries. Tony, I need to talk divorce timelines, just hypothetically. His silence lasted half a second too long before he said, Rachel, come in this afternoon. We'll walk through it. It wasn't hypothetical. We both knew it. Before I left for the appointment, something in me told me to check my email. Not work, personal. I almost missed it, buried between a home decor sale and my monthly subscription to a women's health journal. Subject line: You should see this. It was from Sophie, a name I vaguely recognized as one of Ethan's old friends. We'd spoken maybe twice. I opened it. Hey, Rachel. I know this is weird, and you don't know me well, but I saw something I think you should see. Ethan wrote a message a few weeks ago but never sent it. He was spiraling after the diagnosis. and I think he was trying to reach out. I'm not trying to get involved in your business, but maybe it matters. Attaching the screenshot. Sophie. I opened the image. It was a draft email. Unsent. Rachel. I don't know how to say this. You were always decent to me, even when I didn't make it easy. I hated you because I thought you were trying to replace my mom. But you weren't. You never tried. You just showed up. Over and over. I don't think I ever said thanks. I don't think I ever even thought it. But now I'm looking at this surgery, and I keep wondering why I feel like the only adult I trust to show up might be the one I pushed away the hardest. Anyway, I probably won't send this, but I wanted to say it, at least once. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. It didn't undo anything. Didn't erase years of cold shoulders or Mark's indifference. But it cracked something open. A tiny slit of light in a house that had gone dim. He wrote it, but never sent it. That mattered. And didn't. All at once. At Tony's office. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just asked what I needed to know. The logistics. The financial implications. The cleanest way to untangle a life that had never truly braided. Tony. Always kind, but clinical. Nodded along. You have every legal right to protect your assets, especially since most of them are premarital. And, frankly, you've done more than your fair share. His words didn't make me feel better, just seen. Back home. Mark still hadn't mentioned the account statement I left. Typical. He never commented on things that made him uncomfortable. That night, he slept in the guest room, his door closed. We were two people playing the final scenes of a play where neither remembered the lines, only the blocking. But what neither of us knew was that a new actor was stepping on stage. The next day, Julia showed up, not to our house, thank God, but at Ethan's hospital consult. She signed the financial responsibility forms, put herself as primary contact, and handed the billing department her Amex. It was a move straight from the Julia playbook swoop in late. Rewrite history. Wear the halo. Mark told me over dinner, his voice tight. Julia covered it. She even listed herself as guardian. I told her Ethan's 20. She said it was just for insurance protocol. I nodded. Of course she did. I didn't say more. I didn't need to. Julia had always hated that Ethan lived with us, even briefly. She believed no woman was fit to parent her son but her, and now, with one signature, she'd reclaimed the savior narrative. That was fine. Let her. I had no use for the role anymore. But the real moment of clarity came the next evening. When Melissa, my closest friend, and, ironically, a former stepmom herself, invited me over for wine. She listened as I laid it all out. The rejection, the manipulation, the cold request for money, the buried college account, the email from Sophie. She didn't interrupt, just poured more wine when the glass got low. When I finished, she looked at me with a mix of awe and certainty. Rachel, you didn't refuse to help him. You refused to be used again. That's not cruelty. That's recovery. I let that sink in. It was the first time someone framed my no as an act of self-preservation rather than vengeance. I sipped my wine and stared out of her window, watching rain hit the glass in rhythmic taps. And slowly, I began to imagine a life where I was the center of my own narrative, not the footnote in someone else's redemption arc. That night, I opened a new account, moved the funds from Ethan's college plan into a diversified portfolio, not out of spite, but as a symbolic act reclaiming every ounce of care I had misallocated. I renamed the account after my own initials, no one else's. As I clicked confirm, I exhaled, for the first time in years. It wasn't out of exhaustion, it was out of quiet certainty. But what I didn't know then was that Mark had seen the transaction notification, and the next morning, he was waiting at the kitchen table, ready to pick a fight I wouldn't let him win. The next morning, Mark was already awake when I came downstairs. He sat at the kitchen table, not with a coffee or his usual stack of grating, just his phone, gripped like a weapon. He didn't look up when I entered, but I felt the tension before he even spoke. "You moved the money," he said. His tone was flat, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. Not curiosity, not confusion, accusation. I opened the fridge, retrieved the milk, poured it into my coffee slowly, deliberately. Yes, I did. That was for Ethan. It was never used, and no one asked, until now. "You did it out of spite." I took a sip. "I did it because I finally understood that intention without appreciation is just fuel for resentment." He pushed the phone across the table toward me. The screen displayed the notification email, "Your transfer has been processed." As if he needed proof. As if I was denying it. "You didn't even tell me," he added, quieter this time. "You didn't tell me when you decided my value was transactional," I replied, calmly. "So I stopped offering. That was years ago. You just didn't notice." He stood up then, too fast, chair scraping against the tile. "You think you're better than all of this, don't you?" "No," I said, meeting his eyes for the first time. "But I finally realized I deserve better than this." He didn't reply. He paced instead, running his hand through his hair, back and forth like a man trying to delay a collapse. Then, almost laughing, he said, "So what now? You're just going to walk away after everything I did?" I tilted my head. "After everything you did? Or after everything you let happen?" He froze. "Because there's a difference, Mark. And you never seemed to care enough to know which one it was." He left shortly after that. No slammed doors. No dramatic exits. Just a retreat to the one place he could still pretend to be in control, the school. I stayed behind and looked around our kitchen, trying to remember the last time it felt like mine. I couldn't. That space had always belonged to someone else's comfort zone, someone else's idea of what a family looked like. I had simply filled in the gaps when it was convenient for everyone but me. Later that day, Sophie messaged me again. "Hey, not sure if this matters, but Ethan told me he tried to talk to Mark about you. Said it didn't go well. Apparently Mark told him not to confuse guilt with gratitude. Just thought you should know. Also, Ethan's out of surgery. He's okay." I reread the message 3 times. Guilt with gratitude. That sounded like something Mark would say. Simple. Surface-level advice that sounded insightful but missed the point entirely. I felt no satisfaction in knowing Ethan was okay. Just relief. Quiet. Dull. Like being released from a job you didn't want but still gave your all to. That night, I packed a small overnight bag and went to stay at Melissa's. I needed space, not just physically, but mentally, from the noise of my own obligation loops. Melissa handed me a glass of red wine before I'd even taken off my coat. "You look like someone who just stepped out of a storm," she said. "No, I just finally stepped away from one," I replied. We spent the evening in her living room, talking in half sentences, knowing glances, and the kind of sisterhood that only women who've been underestimated for too long can understand. At some point past midnight, I checked my email again. One new message from Ethan. Subject line, "Thank you, and I'm sorry. I don't know if Sophie told you, but I tried to talk to Dad. He doesn't listen. He hears what he wants to. Always has. I just wanted you to know. I saw the account summary. I saw the note. And I remembered all the times I wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. I didn't think you wanted to hear from me. I assumed you hated me. I wouldn't have blamed you. But I just needed you to know. I don't anymore. I don't hate you. I think I might have even respected you all along. I was just too scared to admit it. You didn't try to replace anyone. You were just there. Steady. Real. And that meant more than I could say. I'm sorry it took this long. I read it in silence. Melissa didn't ask. She just refilled my glass. The tears came slow, like water from a leaky pipe. Not sobbing, not broken, just released. Not because the email fixed anything, but because it was the first time I'd ever been seen in that house as a person, not a position. The next morning, I went home, packed more deliberately. Not just clothes, but paperwork. Mementos, proof of everything I'd built on my own. Mark was out, his things untouched, his world unchanged, mine quietly shifting beneath my feet. I left him a note, not cruel, not emotional, just final. Mark, this was never about money or Ethan. It was about respect, about being heard, about being human in a house where silence was more valued than honesty. I'm not angry, I'm tired. And tired women don't scream, they leave. Rachel. Then I walked out, locking the door behind me with a finality I hadn't felt in years. No dramatic soundtrack, no breakdown, just the soft certainty that comes when you finally stop begging for something you were never going to get. But I knew even as I placed my key in Melissa's spare bowl and dropped my bag at her doorway that the story wasn't finished. There were still conversations to be had, truths to be spoken aloud, and a reputation to reclaim. I wasn't done yet. I had been quiet too long. And I had one more move to make, one that would make them see, really see, the woman they had tried so hard to overlook. For the first time in 5 years, I woke up to quiet that didn't feel like punishment. Melissa's guest room smelled like fresh linen and lavender. No memories in the walls. No cold coffee in the kitchen. No one pacing the hallway rehearsing disappointment. I made my own breakfast, played my own music, and for a brief, surreal moment, I felt like I was living inside a version of my life that had never been tainted by obligation. But reality has a way of tapping your shoulder when you least expect it. And mine arrived in the form of a phone call from Mark. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Are you coming back to talk about this?" I could hear the strain in his voice. The attempt to maintain control while things were slipping through his fingers. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied evenly. I left my statement on the counter. There was a beat of silence. Then, a sigh, sharp, annoyed. "So that's it? You just vanish and expect me to pick up the pieces?" I almost laughed. "No, Mark. You were always the one who vanished. I just finally followed your lead." I ended the call before he could respond. That was the thing about Mark, he never fought for me. He only fought to maintain the image of stability. And now, with me gone, the illusion cracked. Over the next few days, I didn't rage post online. I didn't call his friends or make declarations. No, I did something far more terrifying. I thrived quietly, visibly. I returned to work. I met with clients. I posted a picture on LinkedIn, nothing flashy. Just me and a client shaking hands in front of a closed deal. Caption: invest in people who invest back. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't have to. People talk. And Mark's circle included plenty of shared acquaintances, many of whom had only ever heard his version of our life. Melissa, ever strategic, suggested something bold. "Host a dinner." She said, "Your people, your space. No drama, just let them see you as you are, not who he painted you to be." So I did. I rented a small event space downtown. Invited a dozen colleagues and mutual friends, nothing fancy. Just wine, tapas, and truth. I didn't tell them anything directly. I didn't need to. People draw their own conclusions when the evidence is quiet confidence. Halfway through the evening, one of Mark's co-workers, Jamie, pulled me aside. "I never understood why you two seemed mismatched," she said carefully. "But now, watching you like this, I think I finally get it." I smiled, thanked her, and let the comment sit. The goal wasn't to ruin Mark's image, it was to reclaim mine. But the real twist came from someone I hadn't expected Julia. She emailed me out of the blue. The subject line was as clinical as she always had been about Ethan. Rachel, I don't like you. I never did. But I think it's time I acknowledge something I should have seen sooner. You were better for Ethan than I gave you credit for. He told me about the savings account, the surgery, the message he never sent. I know you're not speaking to Mark right now, and frankly, I don't care about your marriage, but I care about my son. And I think maybe he was right when he said you were the only adult who ever just showed up. The irony wasn't lost on me, Julia. Of all people. Validating what her own son had only just begun to articulate. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The scales were tipping. And not because I shouted louder, but because truth tends to echo when the noise fades. Then came the school board meeting. Mark had invited me months ago. When the yearbook committee asked spouses to give small talks about support systems at home, he forgot to uninvite me, and I didn't correct the oversight. I arrived early, sat quietly, smiled at the receptionist. When Mark walked in and saw me, his face fell not in panic, but in dread. I wasn't there to sabotage. I didn't need to. But the moment I stood to leave after the speaker finished, 3 different teachers followed me out. Rachel, one of them said, I just want you to know we see it now. We didn't before, but we see it. I didn't ask what they meant. I just nodded. Sometimes. Validation comes in the form of eye contact and a pause long enough to say the things politeness forbids. Mark didn't call again, but Ethan did. He'd recovered well from surgery and had moved into a shared apartment downtown. His voice was softer, less defensive. I'm not calling to ask for anything, he said. I just wanted to hear your voice. That's all. And somehow, that was enough. I told him I was doing well. Told him I was living with a friend for now. Told him I'd found some peace. He didn't apologize again. Didn't make grand promises. He just said, I hope someday I can give back what you gave me. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I smiled, because that, right there, was what I had always wanted. Not obedience, not admiration, just acknowledgement. But closure is a funny thing. It doesn't always come dressed in fireworks or cinematic closure. Sometimes. It's just a quiet Sunday morning. A warm mug in your hands, and the absence of tension in your chest. I was close. So close to something I hadn't felt in years. But before I could get there, I had to face one last conversation, one final knot to untangle. Not for revenge, not for closure, but for truth. And that truth would come from Mark himself. One final encounter. One final moment to expose the core of everything that had quietly rotted beneath the surface all along. I didn't reach out to Mark. He asked to meet. A week after the school board event, he sent a message through Melissa of all people. He says he just wants to talk. One time. Said he owes you that much. She relayed. Lips tight. Eyes cautious. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence breathe. Let it stretch long enough for him to wonder if I'd already moved past the need to care. Then I said, okay. 1 hour. Public place. My terms. He agreed. We met at a small coffee shop near the river, mid-morning on a weekday. When the place was half empty and the sky above Portland hung in its usual soft gray. I arrived first, ordered tea, chose the table by the window. When he walked in, he looked smaller, like someone who'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. Maybe he had. Guilt can weigh more than time. He sat down slowly, looked at me like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to start with "I'm sorry" or "How have you been?" In the end, he chose neither. I didn't think you'd say yes. I almost didn't. I said, but I realized I wanted to hear you say it, whatever it is. He swallowed hard. I messed it up. I waited. I let Ethan treat you like you were temporary. I let Julia set the tone before you even had a chance. And I stood by when you were being erased inside a life you helped sustain. Still, I waited. Because regret without comprehension is just noise. I thought. Keeping the peace meant not choosing sides. But now I see that not choosing is its own choice. And I chose against you. Repeatedly. Quietly. Finally, something landed. I leaned forward, voice calm. You didn't just choose silence. Mark, you weaponized it. You used it to make me doubt myself. To convince me that respect was something I had to earn by giving more than I had, and when I stopped offering myself as collateral. You called it cruelty. He nodded, didn't deny it. That was new. I thought you'd come back, he admitted, almost whispering. I thought this was just a phase, that you'd cool off. That's the problem, I replied. You always treated my pain as temporary, like a mood swing, like something to be tolerated until it passed. But it wasn't passing. It was permanent. And it wasn't a storm. It was erosion. Little pieces of myself chipped away every time you let me be unseen. He rubbed his hands together, nervous. Do you hate me? No. I said, that would require energy I no longer give to people who confuse access with entitlement. He flinched. I don't hate you, I repeated, but I no longer explain myself to you, or anyone. The server came to clear our mugs. I nodded politely. Mark looked like he wanted to say more, but the space between us had grown too wide. Not angry, not broken, just final. I stood up, reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a folded envelope. This is the last thing I'll give you, I said. Inside is the login information for the account I moved. It's no longer in Ethan's name, but I left a copy of the financial strategy in case he ever wants to understand how it was structured, not as a handout, as a blueprint. Mark took it with both hands, like it weighed more than it did. I gave him a tight nod. Goodbye, Mark. And I left. No hugs, no lingering looks, just steps measured, certain, free. The following weeks felt like exhaling after holding your breath for years. I found a new apartment not large, but mine. Every wall held silence I chose. Every object placed by my own hand. I started attending yoga on Sunday mornings. Met a few new friends at a local women's business collective. Even took up a pottery class just to feel what it's like to create something messy, tangible. And mine. Ethan sent a postcard 2 weeks later. A literal postcard, like from another time. Rachel, I got your note. And the blueprint. Thank you. I'm not ready to talk more yet, but I wanted you to know I've started learning about investments. Not just financial ones, emotional ones too. I'll reach out when I'm less stupid. I smiled, not because I needed redemption, but because I had already let go of needing it. His growth would be his own. I wouldn't mother it. I wouldn't finance it. But if it bloomed, I'd nod from afar and wish it well. One evening, Melissa and I sat on my tiny balcony, wine in hand, watching the sky turn gold over the Willamette River. You look taller, she said, teasing. I am, I replied, half laughing. Turns out, self-respect adds inches. She lifted her glass to silent revenge. No, I said, lifting mine to meet hers, to loud peace. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a long, long song. I wasn't waiting for the next apology or the next betrayal. I wasn't holding my breath. I was breathing, fully, freely, and that more than any apology, more than any revelation is what healing really looks like. This wasn't just a story about a woman who said no. It was a story about reclaiming voice, agency, and the quiet power of walking away. About how revenge doesn't always come with slamming doors. It comes with leaving them unlocked and never needing to return. It's about how sometimes The most radical thing you can do is choose yourself, unapologetically, and let those who never saw your worth learn to live without your light. If you've ever been the one who gave more than they received, if you've ever been guilted into silence or told that your worth had to be earned, this story is for you. Drop a comment if you've had your own Rachel moment. Hit like if you believe peace is the most underrated form of power. Subscribe for more stories like this because sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't rage, it's rising.